Let's quickly move on to Mr. Felix Majani. We're still talking finance, still talking money. A huge part of that is player contracts. Mr. Majani, as he makes his way over to the stage, is an established sports lawyer, has handled some of the most notable sports cases, and we shall get it from him in the next 1 or 2 minutes. Welcome, Mr. Majani.
Thank you very much for the invitation to the entire Tisini team for having me here. And I've been asked to talk about money in football, especially on the topic of how clubs can maximize on player contracts in order to generate more revenue as they go forward. The first thing I would like to say is, a player is an asset. Is an important asset for the club. The moment the club engages a player on a contract, he immediately gets into the revenue or forms part of the assets of the club. And it is therefore important for the club to maximize on the player's signature in many ways as possible. The first source, of course, is the contract itself, and there are certain clauses which should, in my opinion, be given to the players in order for the clubs to move forward. But I've just been looking at some of the clauses, back home here in Kenya. I looked at some contracts, and these are common clauses, KPL clubs engage players. When I look at these clauses, sometimes I don't know what to say. But I'm happy we have some officials here, like Mr. Korir and Mr. Shikanda. So probably they're in the best position to tell us, why do you put such clauses in contracts?
Yeah, it's lawyers who we consult, and they are the ones who give us draft contracts that we work with.
In your opinion, is this a good clause for a club that wants to make business out of the player?
Well, it depends with how you look at it, because I'll give you examples. You're looking to recruit players for the season, and there are many ways of doing that. One way is that you scout a player over time. For example, you're looking at a player X between now and the next window with a view of signing that player. However, it comes a time when you need to sign him, he's already been snapped up by another team. So what do? You call for trials. And during those trials, the players give their best. So you end up signing this player. However, more than often, you find that a number of players, the moment they sign their contracts, they go into doors mode. You don't see anything on the pitch. So as a club, you need to have a clause whereby by the next window, you need to get rid of that player and get someone else who can help the club.
Fair enough. But the problem here is all these players have these contracts, these clauses. You risk losing a lot of money if you sign a player who hits the ground running, and after that, he gets offers from Tanzania, from Egypt. He can easily terminate this contract by paying you 1 month's notice, and you lose out on revenue. A big risk. Second clause I have here, it says the club can terminate this agreement without notice or pay in lieu of notice in the event of poor performance on the part of the player. I don't know, probably Mr. Shikanda, who decides that a player is not performing? Is it the chairman? Is it the coach? Who is it?
These are common, the common contracts. In my new shoe, I think this is the correct way to go, simply because the players we are dealing with are not equipped, don't understand a lot. One, he will mess the club at any given time. Two, he'll not be as professional as you think. And to come to your question, the coach is supposed to decide. But at times, we could have even questionable coaches. The performance of the player should decide, because no given club will want to drop a player who is giving them results. But you have players who will misbehave, they will not train, or when they train, after training, they'll go and do funny things. On the day of the match, they cannot even play. At the end of the day, the buck stops with the officials, with the chairman. Your team is losing, your team is being beaten. What do? You cannot reach in a mutual agreement with the player. Now he wants, more often than not, the players don't make money for the team. In fact, they come in as liabilities, especially when they're exiting. So it's not like the European players where they'll make money if they're bought by an Egyptian club, etc. So at the end of the day, how do you part with that player? This can help.
There are some players who are a real liability to the team, and that month's notice comes in very handy because you find this is a player who's hit over 30, he's too demanding, he's not giving you the results. So that will come in very handy because with a month's notice, it means you part ways and you move on. Now you talked about if you need to commercialize on that player, you cannot commercialize on only every player. There are some who you sign for a very specific reason. Maybe you need maturity in your team for a very specific period. Sometimes that clause comes in very handy so that you part ways in a good way.
Okay, it might come in handy in your opinion, but in the eyes of the law, it is not. It will cost you an arm and a leg once the players file claims against you. So my recommendation for a club which looks to make business and maximize on players is to reform such clauses and engage in contracts which are beneficial for both the club and the player. And therefore, this moves me to the next clause, whereby I can try and point out one or two clauses which clubs can use in order to make sure that they maximize on players. Some of these things are familiar to, I think, all of you here. Bonuses are one of the most important aspects where clubs can maximize. You engage a player on a contract, you give him something. If the club gains promotion, he wins matches, he scores goals, assists, trophies, appearances, and also housing allowance and all that. Ultimately, if a player is motivated, he will perform well. Secondly, you can engage a player in the contract. You can have what we call a sell-on fee, whereby if the player performs well and you get offers from other clubs, the player can get a percentage of the transfer fee. These are motivation for the player. It's also good for his well-being, and probably you can maximize on that. Another one is image rights. This is still something developing in Kenyan football, but it's a very, very good platform which clubs can try and exploit and see how they can give players certain percentage of the image rights which you get from, I believe, and you're entitled to that from, once we have this Bet King sponsorship with the Football for Kenya Federation. I think clubs just are entitled to get something from the image rights, and the players are also entitled to 10%, but that's for another day. Also insurance, please just get back there. Again, on insurance and medicals, this is something clubs, unfortunately, some of them are not taking it lightly. We had this case last year of a player who played for the national team. He got injured. I think it was Gor Mahia. They abandoned him. The federation didn't take care of him. I mean, look, if you have a player who plays in the national team, I mean, chances of him going abroad are very high. So if you had provided some medical cover for the player as a club, I'm sure you would not engage in this back and forth with the federation. And also the habit of abandoning players once they are injured. A player is an asset. He can be injured for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, but if you take good care of them, they come back, hit the ground running, you never know what will happen tomorrow. So I encourage clubs, in whatever they do, engage players in very reasonable contracts and clauses whereby we'll motivate them to perform and you will get some benefits going forward. Now, some contracts, some clauses which can good for the club's well-being. Something in Kenyan football I've seen, clubs don't want to engage players on long-term contracts. 1 year, 2 years. That is not enough. Players need 5 years. That gives you contractual stability as a club. If you give him a 2-year contract, he hits the ground running in the 2nd year. After that, the contract expires, you lose out on transfer fee. I would encourage clubs to give them maybe performance-based contracts, long-term, for 5 years, with the salary increasing every year depending on the player's performance. Another thing, you can explore what we call, buyback clauses. Once you transfer the player, put in a clause whereby you can get him back if he performs well, have the right to sign him for a certain fee, and then sell him again to another club for a higher, amount of transfer fee. A sell-on fee. I've seen some clubs doing this in Kenya, which is very encouraging. A player goes to Egypt. You tell the Egyptian club in the transfer agreement that if he goes to England, you get 20% of the transfer fee. That is very good form of generating money. Also appearances. You tell the club, if he makes 10 appearances, you get a certain amount of money. Individual honors, player of the year, achievements. These are things you can explore in order to maximize on your business as a club once you transfer the player to another club. We also have marketing, public relations. During my time, in the 80s and 90s, I'm an ardent fan of FC Leopards. And, we would see these players like the likes of Masiga and Mulamba. We would adore them. We would want to associate with them. I don't know how, maybe things have changed or maybe have changed, but nowadays you see a player, an FC Leopards player, you don't even know his name, And with due respect, those days, these clubs of Gore and FC, they used to make up the national team. Things have changed. I am happy that, we are taking players from across the country, but these two clubs still have an opportunity to market those players, make sure that you engage them in sponsorship agreements with your partners. If you have BetSafe or maybe you get a contract with Galana, they can do some, some appearances, some promotional activities from them, and ultimately the player becomes a bit famous, and you can get something as a club.
I know one question. I will field a question that I know a lot of people watching and here might be interested in. But as usual, for any more questions, kindly direct them to @Tisini Media. We will be able to push them forward to the speakers at hand. Felix, there are both sides of an argument or both sides of a story here. Of course, with the players' interests at heart. But on the other hand, you find some situations where a player is double signing, for example, with two different clubs. On the other hand, we've seen cases over the last bit of clubs sacking players almost at will, no need to mention names, a certain Moneybags FC, sacking over 5 players, I believe. What are your thoughts on both of those situations? I believe the dynamics are different.
Thank you for that. Double signing, of course, is not allowed, and we need to educate players on this. Some of them just think you can go left, right, and center and do that, but there are consequences for that, and I think that's exactly what's happening with the. I don't know, but that's what I've read in the media about Duncan Otieno. So we need to tackle that and educate players not to just sign contracts however they wish. What was the second question, please?
About a trend we're seeing about clubs firing players very randomly. We saw recently a certain Kenyan Premier League club, firing over 5 players.
It's unfortunate, and that's, I think, I don't want to use the word arrogant, but, we need to put in some systems and structures at the federation level, whereby we have proper dispute resolution chambers that can resolve these matters within 60 days, as required by FIFA.
All right, thank you for that. As we move on, thanks so much for your time, Mr.
Michael Senelwa, Chief Executive Officer, Vihiga United and Vihiga Queens Football Clubs, and the elected Secretary General, Football Kenya Federation, Vihiga County Branch. Since most of my colleagues have covered quite much that is in my presentation, I'll be able to summarize and focus on areas to do with how to monetize football. Beryl tackled quite a lot of our challenges as women Premier League clubs. I can see a number of colleagues here from women teams. I can see Thika Queens. I can see Makolandas. I can see Kisumu Starlets. So thank you, Beryl, once more. So I'll go to the challenges and the subject of the day. So kindly, can you move to slide 5? So if you see our objectives, which we have endeavored to achieve always, and as the speakers that came before me have mentioned, we believe in player retention. One of our objectives was to tap, nurture, develop, and expose women footballers around Vihiga and Western area. We have managed to do that. Bring the county and region women football, that is the entire Western region, to the national grid. We've been able to do that, and we are now 3 times women champions in a row. Matters to do with creating awareness on so many other issues that affect our women gender. There is an area of using men to champion women issues. We've managed to do that, and that is why our ladies are doing well. Now we are monetizing football, and if I go to the next slide number 9 and 10, a few of our challenges, many of the speakers have mentioned, we over-rely on sponsorships. It is a challenge we have at our club because we only have one sponsor, and the other sources of funds are from donations. We have some credit facilities. Maybe when we come to Nairobi, we have a relationship with a hotel. They give us services on credit and we pay later. They are not quite healthy because they actually affect our books. Remember, football is business. The club is a business. So we have books to balance. So how do we monetize this? We have some of our assets who are players. Thank you, Akili, you've mentioned this. We have KEFWA here as well, so when you educate our players, let them know matters to do with contracts and why players are assets to the club. So we have players as assets. The club is a business itself. And so many speakers have talked here about branding our products. So we need, like Vihiga Queens, going forward. If you look at our prospectus, which will not be here, Bado Inapikwa, we now want to go to the next level because we wanted to dominate Kenya first. I think we are doing that. Now we want to go to the next level. As a player, of course, you have image rights. Players themselves can also get some kill from their images as persons off the pitch. Of course, club commercial rights, as my fellow speakers have talked about. There's sponsorship and there's membership. So these are areas we're trying to look at as a club so that we can be able to add to the sponsor that we have. So there's a lot of emphasis on branding. We also need to brand our assets. As players, we've got to brand players as well. We've got to encourage them to keep their images in the right manner. So I think I'll wind my presentation at that. I can see you are up. I had a lot to say, but because of time, we will chat some other day. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Sanelwa, there, CEO of Vihiga Queens.